Welcome to Nightmare365.
This is the center of weirdness for the entire planet.
There's tons of unsolved mysteries out there. Witches still exist.
What about monsters?
Do you believe in ghosts?
Bigfoot is not out there.
Bigfoot is definitely out there. UFOs are real.
UFOs might be real.
Do you believe in conspiracies?
I consider myself a conspiracy theorist.
I want to believe in all these case files.
Trust no one. The government lies to you.
We're just two brothers exploring the unexplained, mysterious, and spookiness that lives among us. Welcome to the center of weirdness known as Nightmare365 Radio. What is going on, everybody? I'm Matt.
I'm Greg.
And today we are talking about CaseFile 58. We talk about West Memphis 3, and in 1994, teenagers Damien Echols, Jesse Miss Kelly, Jason Baldwin were arrested and tried for the murders of 3 young boys in West Memphis, Arkansas. At the time of the prosecution asserted that the boys were murdered as a part of a satanic ritual. All 3 were accused and convicted of the murders and sentenced to life imprisonment, and Echols himself was sentenced to the death penalty, which was never carried out by the state.
Yeah.
And then following submissions of new DNA evidence in 2010, the state of Arkansas negotiated a plea agreement with all 3 that were accused and allowed them to submit. I never heard of this.
Like the Alford plea?
Yeah, the Alford plea, which essentially asserts that while the 3 acknowledge the state has enough evidence to convict them, they maintain they're innocent, and then they were all released on time served. This one is an interesting case, and it seems to happen a lot in the United States itself. So,
well, especially back then, like when they didn't have DNA or they didn't have like enough forensics evidence.
Yeah,
and there was they had to go off like just genuine police work.
Yeah, and just thinking about the case when this happened, when the 3 boys were actually murdered in 1993.
Yeah,
and then the gentleman, when the boys, the West Memphis 3, as they're known, the ones who were tried and convicted.
Yeah,
it's in 1994, so it's crazy to watch video. And there's 3 documentaries. Actually, there's more documentaries, but the ones that were put out by HBO, the ones that made like the biggest waves,
sure,
were Lost Paradise. Then there was a second one, the third one, and they definitely have their biases, which I want to talk about. But they were definitely a good starting point. So if not anybody is familiar with this this case that takes place in the 90s, check those out as a starting point. But I just want to mention before we get started, thanks to our buddy Anthony, who brought this to our attention, said, this is a great case. A lot of people talked about this, and I even looked up on YouTube, and there's tons of other YouTubers that have done this case as well. So
that and a bunch of like celebrities and like famous people actually got involved.
Yeah, Johnny Depp, to name one.
Yeah, I mean, with the director of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, Metallica even let like their music, be used for the Lost Purgatory and the Lost Paradise, series of these documentaries. So that was interesting. But take a look at our website, Nightmare365.com, for all of our contact information. If you do have show suggestions for us, that's where you could, just email, give us a call, or even send something to our P.O. Box. All that stuff is there. And make sure to subscribe to us on our YouTube channel and hit the bell for notifications, where you can watch all of our weekday weirds, spooky stories, eerie destination, and podcast.
Stay spooky.
That's right. Definitely stay spooky. So make sure to check that out. And if you want to support us in any way you like this show, make sure to check out our shop and buy a t-shirt, sticker, hoodie. It's becoming that fall time feel, man, almost.
Yeah, it feels really good outside right now.
You like it?
Yeah, it's low 60s. I like it.
I'm digging it. So yeah, make sure to do that. Thank you. So today we are opening up the Eerie Vault to talk about CaseFile 58. So let's just get into the backstory, because I feel like I was one of these, people that didn't know much about
the backstory,
this case at all.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch The Green Mile or Shawshank Redemption, it's pretty much the same thing.
Right. It is the same thing. And
yeah, there is a lot to this, especially with like the 3 teenage kids.
Yeah, Damien Echols, which if you watch the documentary, and this was one of the things that, weirded me out, this kid was definitely weird back then.
Well, yeah.
He's obviously changed.
Yeah, I think he's changed, but I think maybe he was, I don't know, like maybe a mental illness back in the day.
I don't think so. I think he was just like one of those teens that was just
into weird shit.
See, that's one of the things that I didn't understand, and like the documentary. This is where I feel like the documentary plays a big role into influencing people.
Yeah, I
I
definitely.
mean, if you look at this in Arkansas, there was, and I do remember driving out to like Indiana, all these different places, and like they call it going through the Bible Belt, and you just see all this stuff about, God, and the same thing that was playing during the 1990s and 93 when these, three young boys were murdered, and they all talked about like satanic rituals. Oh, they dressed in all black. They listened to like weird music.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at like what was it, the Columbine shooting, right?
Right, the trench coat.
Yeah, the trench coat, all black. Like, what were they called? Like goth kids back in the day, right? That they wore all black, like painted their nails.
Yeah,
black,
I was good friends with our buddy who wore a trench coat, and then after that happened, he was never allowed to wear one again.
That's
Actually two of them. I remember Mike and Ian. They were in my grade, and they were always wore trench coats.
yeah.
And it was one of those things where, like, I never thought about it. They were good kids. I liked them. I enjoyed, hanging out with them in school, and I never felt that. See, I don't know. I think everybody has these stigmas, and I think religion plays a big part in this too.
Yeah,
And I think religion like doesn't help in a way, because it's going back to like the Salem witch trials in 1692, and just like the witch hunt and the crap that went on there, because you didn't believe what we believed.
Sure.
You're listening to like crazy music, and same thing, like Damien Eccles was put in this, and he came off very arrogant
He did.
and very, like, oh, I know more than you. And like any teenager, I felt the same way, like growing up. So that was really it. And this case, there's so much like this, I feel like, because I even
What that happens?
Yeah, because I even brought up just some of the information that I found myself, in doing this research, and just saying like, all right, let me look at some of the history into like wrongly convicted people.
Oh, there's a shit ton out there. Like, look at it. What was the movie with Denzel Washington, the hurricane or whatever,
Oh yeah.
that he got wrongly convicted.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've definitely come a long way, with DNA evidence, fingerprinting, profiling, et cetera. But there seems to be a lot of mistakes that still happen. And I found like this statistic, and also Connie from the UK is also helping us out with just some of the information, not just on this, but in upcoming shows. So I just want to give her a shout out, and you could actually follow her on Twitter at or actually it's her handle. It's at WTFIS. It's pretty much what the fuck is going on.
Yeah,
72.
but WTF is going on.
We'll link it up in the show notes. But this one, she helped me find some of the information, but also just digging on myself. There was a study in 2016 which reported that there are like 2 million people behind bars, roughly, right? And if 1% of those were wrongly convicted,
20,000 people.
20,000 innocent people are actually serving time for the crimes that they didn't commit. And that's probably like, think about this, like 1 in 25 people on death row are probably innocent in themselves. This is rough numbers. Comes from different studies, and then there's some of the famous cases,
Yeah.
Stephen Avery,
Yeah.
that was making a murder.
Yep.
So-
I remember that one. Well, he didn't help himself. I watched that on Netflix.
I never watched that.
He was an idiot.
It seemed like, but see, this case, if anybody liked Making a Murder, this is like predates that,
Correct.
So like check out West of Memphis, Lost Paradise, like all those documentaries on the West Memphis 3. And then the West Memphis 3 really are, the guys that were convicted of this.
Sure.
It doesn't have anything to do with, the actual little boys that got killed because of this. And it's very gruesome because you do see like pictures, film from the 90s, and it's like uncensored. So
Yeah.
if you don't have the stomach for that kind of shit, I wouldn't watch it. But the list goes on, like the Central Park 5, the Birmingham 6. There's just all these cases, that just, when you look at the court system and you look at just how this case in the West Memphis 3 was handled, it's crazy. I mean, you could talk about...
Well, yeah, I mean, like, the way this case was handled, the way, like, the investigation started, especially with the evidence, like, I don't think you can get away with that now. Or you shouldn't be able to get away with it now.
In terms of what? Just like what the police did, or what the kids did themselves?
What the police did investigating it. Because, like, you're supposed to like basically cordon off the area,
Right.
right? You're not supposed to let anyone in there.
Yeah.
And like once the investigators came, like basically like the creek bed that the kids were laying in was like almost trampled across and trampled on.
There's obviously
And
people
the
there
bodies
filming.
were moved.
Yeah.
So like you can't really investigate and find out what exactly happened if one, the bodies are moved, and two, if you let everyone walk through the crime scene.
Yeah.
Same thing with like the O.J. Simpson case, right?
Right.
You know, like they let everyone through that house.
Yeah, you have to have somebody like take control and say like enough is enough.
Yeah, you can't go through there. So like that way, like how it was handled from like the very start was wrong.
Right. Yeah, and this I guess I want to mention more of the names of the actual victims because I feel like no matter what news.
No,
You
you never get the victims' names. You always get the suspects'
Right.
names.
So this event, this murder took place May 5th, 1993, where 3 8-year-old boys, Steve Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Baez, were reported like, missing. Byers.
Will Byers.
Like Stranger Things?
Will Byers.
Does it have any connection?
I think so.
That's fucked up. That is real messed up. So,
They went to ride their bikes.
Yeah, they were just outside playing, and then all of a sudden, they went missing. Their families, try to find them, and no luck. And the next day, evidence came up when they were searching the creek bed, and they found a shoe, and then eventually a body.
Yeah, they found the kids like hogtied.
Yeah, that was a weird thing.
And naked, right?
Yeah, this is one of the big things. Like, if you look into this, case when the actual patrolman did find them the next day around 1:45. In the Muddy Creek bed in Robin Hood Hills area section of, this area of town. And they were all hogtied, like they said, with their shoelaces. But one of the interesting things was they were all the knots were different.
Yeah.
There was 3 different knots. So that raised suspicion, like, all right, it could be 3 different people.
Sure.
And then it comes back to like the 3,
the 3 guys.
3 guys that, did they all tie different knots and like, let's tie them up together, stuff like that. And they were all naked. And one of the, the kids, Byers himself, had lacerations to his scrotum area.
Yeah, bite marks
On his head, stuff like that. So there's a lot of interesting stuff to this case. Just looking at it right from the get-go, like, all right, they were tied up, 3 different knots, found in the Muddy Creek bed, and it was right off of like 2 major highways, right next to, it doesn't exist now today, but there was an old truck stop, like where truckers used to just fill up, fuel up.
See, those like truck stops, like, ooh. I think those like, a lot of murders happen there.
See, that's one of the things. I have a bunch of different theories, and
because it could have just been a trucker passing through.
Yeah, this is where, like, when you dive in and look at the evidence, and then you also, just watch the documentaries and some of the forensic people that they had on afterwards. Because in the first one's just about, like, following these people and saying, like, all right, they didn't do it. And I feel like the documentaries are good. They were entertaining, but they're missing so much stuff.
Yeah, they always are.
And they're very biased in what they're trying to do and portray. So that's why I say, like, it's definitely a good starting point, but don't take it for like the gospel. Like, do your own research, and we're only going to give you like a tidbit. I think we should really go into some of the suspects on this, because 3 young boys died. They were like brutally killed in the way and dumped into this muddy, bayou in West Memphis. And I think do your own research, look at, the autopsy reports, forensic. I mean, you could look at all this stuff. I mean, just the Wikipedia alone is just crazy, with how much information's on here. There's a bunch of Reddit feeds. There's also, you just type in the different names of the actual, people that they think, like accused.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that they think like real suspects.
There is.
Like even like the DNA evidence, which came out, in the later 2000s, linked up the stepfather of one of the kids.
So yeah,
he had a piece of hair that was left on one of the shoelaces.
Right.
And if you think about it, like maybe possibly because it's in the same household that could have been left behind. So that's not really conclusive. But if there were like the shoelaces were taken out of the shoes and tied up, like how did it stay on there?
True. And you
He
brought
looks like a killer.
all right, you brought up this point and found with the DNA of evidence on the actual suspect.
Correct.
And Terry Hobbs is the one we're talking about. He's really not much in the film. He's actually in the third film because after they do all this,
Research.
film, and they keep going on, they paint the suspect as like, all right, we're painting this person. Nope, we're painting this person. Nope. Well, finally, the third documentary is painting Terry Hobbs. And I did a bunch of research, and if you actually look at Terry Hobbs himself, his DNA wasn't found on his son.
No.
It was found on another boy.
Yep.
So, and this is really where it's weird. Like, I mean, no offense to people down here, but in the early 90s, just watching this documentary and you watch some of these people, this is like all these people that were being like, Terry Hobbs is a stepfather of this, guy. And I don't know. I just thought it was funny. Like some of the stuff, like just watching.
You could say it.
No teeth.
Yeah.
Things like that. It was just interesting. Like, I guess that's what happened. But anyway, Terry Hobbs, he, in 2007, has identified hair fragment on Michael Moore's bindings, which was consistent with Hobbs's DNA, right?
Yeah.
But if you look closer, which they all say that, like, oh, DNA evidence proves this, but from my understanding, which I never knew about this in DNA testing, but it utilized different strands. So there's this thing called MT DNA testing, which it's not as strong and conclusive as regular DNA, but this is like the closest thing that you can get to it, which I don't know too much about this. So somebody would have to explain this a little bit more to me because I'm not like a scientist or anything that would understand this. But so it's definitely DNA that matches up to Hobbs, but
it could also match other people.
Right.
Yes.
So
because you have to have a full spectrum of like the DNA on whatever you're trying to test.
Yeah.
So if you don't have, basically it's like a puzzle, right? Let's say there's 100 pieces and you only got 80 of the pieces.
Yeah.
You can't definitively say 100% like it's him because you're missing, 20 pieces.
Right. And I'm not knocking anybody who lives out here because also like if you look at some of these suspects like Terry Hobbs and you can go into his
He looks like Emilio Estevez right there. A little bit.
No, he looks like what's his name from the Terminator?
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, the cop from the Terminator.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, he does.
The Terminator 2. But anyway, like you look at his rap sheet and then you look at just some of the stuff that he was, arrested for, and just his background is just interesting in itself. But this one, I don't know, like to go over the suspects, because I think that's what we should really like focus on. Like another one, like the documentary Lost in Paradise really focuses on is one of the other stepfathers of the children, John Mark Byers.
Yep.
And in the second one, they made him look fucking nuts and crazy.
They did.
And I mean, he
looks nuts.
He was nuts. And there was also a lot of stuff, if you look at his past again, right? And you look at just some of the information on this guy, and he contradicted himself so much throughout the film. So he didn't make himself look.
Yeah, but you can also spin that, like, editing wise, like, because certain things don't happen in certain, sequences, but you can edit that to make it look worse than it actually is.
No, but when he says, like, one time, two actual people, like, because there was bite marks, right? So they're like,
like, those bite marks didn't match any of the three suspects.
The original three.
Yep.
Damien Eccles, Jason Baldwin,
So
and
that's
Miss
like,
Kelly.
I think that's like a big piece that most people don't focus on.
And they say that's a lot better than fingerprinting.
Yeah, bite marks are. Yeah, your dental records. You can't fake that.
So the thing was, at first, when I'm watching these documentaries, I'm like, all right, this guy definitely did it. Like, because if we look at his background, right, he was the stepfather of Byers, and he has a long criminal history himself. Even before 1993, different arrests, different like jewelry, he was
terrorist
robbery,
threats,
like all these different
Grand
things.
Theft Auto.
And in the film, there's this group, right? In the 1990s, there's this group that watched the documentary from HBO, the first one, and said like, holy shit, these kids didn't do it. And they started a group, Free the West Memphis 3.
Yeah.
And they came down. There was actually a couple people from New Jersey, which it's kind of funny. And they just put all this different evidence. They were trying to help out, and they were actually really. I tried to find their website. I don't think it's up anymore, or if it is, it's definitely changed. So I tried my best, and maybe it is out there. I just was typing in the wrong thing, or didn't
GhostbustersNJ.com.
check them out. They're good shit. But this guy, like, when he was talking to one of them, he says like, oh, I had my, teeth replaced, blah, blah, blah. And you could, well before like the murders. Then afterwards, he tells like somebody else, like, no, it was right afterwards. You could look at the dental records. So it's not like, even if you edit that, it spins it in a bad way.
But like, that's easy looked up though.
True. And people, like, I don't know in 1993 or 1994 if they really could. Like, I don't know how easy, how much digging you have to do. But even him himself, like, he took a polygraph test, and it was like so drawn out. Like in the documentary, he takes the polygraph test, and you're like, all right, what happened? Are they going to come back to that? And then finally, at the end, they come back to it because it came out that he did pass the polygraph test. But there was something in there that like really caught my attention.
Which was what?
And when he's talking about it, and he's talking about his wife.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 years after the West Memphis 3 were sentenced in 1994, his wife ended up dying.
Yeah.
Right? And she was on a lot of medication. So in the interview, when he's just talking to the guy, he says like, yeah, she was, very depressed, very suicidal. Like she took a lot of stuff and suicidal.
Yep.
Like that came up. And then he talked about that. But then later on in the interview, he goes, she was murdered. And then it's like, I picked up on that, like just listening to him, and like that's not edited. That's just him saying this. So
I get that.
At first he says it's suicide, and then he said it's murder. So I'm just like, shit. All right. So now, if you backtrack to more of John Mark Byers' history and information, and also like his criminal past, there was an incident when him and his wife moved out of town to get away from this, and listen to this scenario. And it's in the documentary, so you can listen to it, but you could also look it up in the police charges. I'm trying to find it real quick, but he got another boy to assault another boy, and he was carrying a gun, and he gave the other boy a knife and, like, told him to assault this kid, and he got charged for this.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds really eerie similar to, like, what happened to these kids. These little boys were killed with a knife.
Yeah. They were.
And assaulted. And so, like, thinking to myself, like, all right, what guy who goes on...
You basically, you think that he coerced somebody into killing the 3 kids?
No, I don't. But, like, and when I'm watching this documentary, that's what I thought. I'm sitting here saying, like, all right, this guy did what he did. He was crazy. This happened to his stepkid. He's been in this, this child's life all his life, pretty much, from what I gathered. And like your kid died this way, and then now years later, you're gonna do this to another kid? Like, are you fucking serious?
People are fucking nuts, man.
Like it. So at first, like I really was like, all right, this guy had something to do with it, because even when he got on trial and he was, being questioned, there was a lot of stuff that he was saying on the stand that were very contradictory to like who he was or what he was originally saying. So I'm like, all right, this motherfucker definitely had something to do with it. But then we go to this.
Mr. Bojangles.
Mr. Bojangles, which this is another thing in the trial that got me.
He owns the restaurant, Bojangles.
Well, yeah, it's actually a restaurant, Bojangles. So on the night of May 5th, the actual murders that took place in 1993, a call came in from the Bojangles restaurant and said, Mr. Bojangles was like, yo, we have this African-American male who just entered our restaurant covered in blood and mud and appeared to be very confused. And this man went into like the women's bathroom and was on the floor.
The Green Mile.
What are you talking about the Green Mile for?
He was African-American. He said he didn't do it.
Yeah, but all right. So this like incidents where he went into the women's bathroom, there was blood on the walls, whatever, and the cops were called, and the female cop that responded. This just goes to show you like how shit Arkansas was at this time. So the female cop that came to the call at 8:42 that night went to the fucking drive-thru and was talking to whoever, not going in, talking to the drive-thru to get the information. But apparently the guy
wanted some Bojangles sandwiches, pulled up and was like, all right, let's do it.
And So Mr. Bojangles, who this African American guy is now labeled as, left and apparently never seen, again.
Yeah.
And
It was the restaurant was only a mile from where the crime
right.
scene actually is.
And there's a cool video if you actually type in Mr. Bojangles, like West Memphis 3 on YouTube. There was these guys that did a drone video, and they show you how far away it is. So then when I was watching the trial and listening to this lady talk about it, because she was brought on the stand as a witness, and she was saying, like, all right, I got this call. I went over, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then they were like, did you think it was suspicious? Like, all right, these kids are missing. Now this guy shows up covered in blood and mud, and you didn't think that was suspicious?
At the crime scene, there was a hair from an African American found at the crime scene. And they took blood samples or scrapings, they said, from the bathroom walls. But those were lost.
Those were lost by another detective.
So they can't compare the two.
Right.
And since like that cop didn't go in the restaurant and identify the guy or even get an ID or a name or anything, he's gone essentially.
Yeah, like, so you look into this, right? And then you also look into that she said in the thing too, when we questioned her, like, you didn't think this was suspicious, like this dude just shows up, these kids are missing, like, and she's like, it was outside the quadrant. And then they're like, what do you mean? Like, there was a search radius, I guess, that they were searching for the kids, and it was outside that quadrant. So, like, I didn't think anything of it.
That's just bad police work.
And then I'm just like, what the fuck? So the more you look into this case, not only did the police botch this shit up so bad, missing evidence, not doing enough detective work to go into the goddamn restaurant when this guy is covered in blood and mud. And it's only a mile away. And if you actually look at it, you could really walk the bayou where they were found, like where their bodies were found.
Yeah,
it's really like
line.
a creek.
Yeah.
It's a straight line to Bojangles, and then it's a hard left, and boom, you're in the restaurant. Now, I don't know. I guess I want to get into a little bit more of like just the evidence with the actual like Damien, all them stuff, because there is 2 websites, which one is called investigationdiscovery.com, and it just gives you all the, the evolving stories and the doubt and the disinformation on the 3 boys, Damien Eccles, Jesse Miskelly, and Jason Baldwin. And you could read as much as you want about this. So it's back and forth. Then there's also this other website that I found called thoughtcatalog.com, which really just paints the boys of West Memphis 3 in a very bad light, where they're like, all right, there was no circumstantial evidence on the gentleman, but there's plenty of evidence that still do point to the boys themselves.
Yeah, definitely. There definitely is a lot of evidence that does point to the 3 original convicted. Yeah,
like their alibis don't line up.
Nope.
Like, just a timeline of where they said they were, what they were doing at the time doesn't line up with some of their family members testifying, some of their friends testifying.
Yeah, Damien said he was on the phone with 3 different people, and
they all said no.
All those people said no. But like, then again, I don't know. Maybe you were trying to cover up. You were doing something else. Maybe, I don't know.
It's possible, but just looking into like the information, and there's just so much information that.
And like, let me say one thing too is, what was it? Miss Kelly and Baldwin took a polygraph test and both failed, right?
Yeah,
I think go down to the bottom. I think it was at the bottom.
This one on this article.
Yeah. So they took a polygraph test and they failed, but you can't use that in court because that's all subjective,
right?
To the polygrapher examiner.
Yeah, I would go and just let people watch the actual or just investigation. I don't think it's on this one. I think it's on this one.
Yeah. Keep going.
So I would definitely look up to the actual thoughtcatalog.com and then also the investigation discovery. I'm going to link both of these articles if people want to read, because this gives you so much information on both of the cases. But even if they did pass the polygraph test,
Eccles,
Miss Eccles, well, that's Damien Eccles,
yep,
and Miss Kelly, they both failed the polygraph test. One of the other informations that like really, convicted and set these, guys into prison for 18 years for even if it's something, and they claim to this day that they're innocent.
That's like us with the boat incident.
Yeah, but Miss Kelly himself, this is like kind of I feel like a tragic story. So Jesse Miss Kelly, he has a 72 IQ, and they keep reiterating that in the documentary. So I don't know if that's something that's still true, if it's something that he was borderline,
Sure.
not all there. And this is also another thing too, if you actually look into the information on when he was questioned by police, because that's a whole big thing too, where they were saying like
he could have been coerced into his confession.
A lot of people believe that
because like he wasn't that smart too.
Yeah, and here they said he was put in like the room for like 12 hours and questioned, and then when they finally put on like the tape, Jesse, confessed after hours of questioning and said like, all right, this is how it went down. And he did describe a lot of stuff. I don't know if they coerced him into saying like, all right, this is how it went down.
Well, so here's like my take on that, right? Because they probably go over all the evidence.
Yeah.
With that, him. And they start painting the picture of like how these kids were murdered, like what does it look like, how it was done, and like start to ask him like, all right, like, did you do it? And I think in his mind, since he wasn't that smart, believed that he did do it. So he goes back to some of the evidence that was told to him. So that's why it looks bad.
Yeah, I mean, just what if you listen to his tapes, and it's in the documentary as well, and you could look at it online, but just listening to some of his, where he says, yes, we did it. One of the boys was trying to flee, and I went and grabbed him and brought him back. So it almost seems like he didn't do anything. He was just there.
Maybe.
And
which is possible, that he was just there.
Right.
Or maybe he knows who did it.
See, that's the thing. Like, if he wasn't that smart, like, eventually I feel like it would come out. But he still, says, like, years later, he came out and said, like, too, like, they told me to say this stuff.
Which is maybe true.
And also, one of the things, too, if you actually look at some of the things that when he was saying, which was also very interesting, because his lawyer was there at a time. There is evidence of this. His lawyer was there at the time, on a different, I guess, confession or whatever. And his lawyer in 1994 said, don't say anything. Don't say anything. But he still started talking, which was really weird too. And then also, it's also in the documentary too, and this is where it gets twisted. Like, if you actually look at some of the evidence, and then when you look at the documentary, it's like, all right, one of the cellmates of Jesse came forward and said, like, he told me some pretty gruesome shit, about like the crime.
Yeah,
and it's like, how would he know that too? Like, it's just something that they told him, eventually, and he just kept that in the back of his mind, or was it something totally, different? So that was another thing. And when they also paint it as a satanic ritual and shit, there was detectives that did come forth later in the different documentaries and reading some of the information, and they said, like, there's no satanic ritualistic way that these kids were killed. It looked like they were killed out of anger. It looked like they were dumped here, and there's no like setup of as far as like if there was a ritual that was happening, or almost like a bloodletting, things like that. So that's what was crazy to me. I don't know. This story to me has so many holes in it, and it starts with the police department.
It does start with the police department. They botched the investigation from the start.
They did.
Which kind of sucks. I mean, because then you'll never really, truly, definitively know who did it.
Yeah, and there was other suspects that they had, when they were coming up, and also this other, investigation, and there's just so much information. I don't know if we could really cover all of it, and just like the proceedings, because it's been going on for 18 years.
Yeah.
Because they just were let out in 2011, and what's strange to me that no one else has ever been brought.
Is what? Eccles lives in Salem, Massachusetts now?
Yeah, that's weird. One of the things that really pissed me off about Eccles, and like almost I feel like he had something to do with it, was an interview. I don't know if this is just because you get locked up and now you're just pissed off at life.
Maybe.
But he was just saying in one of I forget where I watched it, but you could see him saying like, I want everybody to like fear the name Damien. When they think of like Damien, like I want people to like cringe and be scared and all this different stuff. And it's like, what? And then
I would think like you're just pissed off at the world by that point because fucking you spent 18 years in prison.
Yeah, but I don't even think it was 18. I think it was very early on when he was saying this.
Oh,
like,
even if, like, let's say you were committed of a crime that you didn't commit and you thought you were going to spend
I'd be pissed.
Life in prison, man. You know?
Yeah, and plus put on death row.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, even afterwards, too, like, talking to interviews and stuff, he's like, I just want to live my life and I want to forget about this. I don't want ever this to come up again and all this other stuff. Which I don't know, like, how you'd cope with being in prison for that long and then finally being out.
Sure.
So I don't know. But then all of a sudden he's like, I don't want to talk about this. I just want to live my life. Like, he says all this stuff and then goes out and writes a book.
Yeah.
And then is going to write another book. And then goes on all these shows. And
you need to make money.
I understand that.
I'm sure you're going to profit off of this.
Jason Baldwin is working for a construction company, it seems like.
Yeah.
So, like, why? I mean, is Damien just want to, like, he was in the limelight.
He just wants
the main
limelight,
focus of the documentary was on him. So probably watching that after a while and just saying, like, all right, I don't know. It was just weird to me. Yeah. And there's just so much in this case, man. Like, I feel that this happens and we could probably just the cases. I want to bring up another, I'm going to try to find it. I think the
Baltimore one?
No, not just that. There was just like I put it over here. So there's a list too that I found of the 5 of the worst wrongful convictions out there. And James Richardson, just looking at that case, James Woodward, Daryl Hunt. This was another one that, I mentioned, and then also Connie sent us this one. Kurt Bloodsworth, Thompson Kelly. So there's tons of these. I should link this one up in the actual show notes as well, which I think I should, because it's frustrating how much evidence and all the same stuff goes into play too.
22 years in prison, you didn't do it, and you get released.
Well, yeah, this guy's, what did he spend?
He got released at the age of 53. So basically, he spent since he was 31.
Yeah, 26, whatever, 28. And then you spent pretty much half of your life in prison for something that you didn't commit. Well, that's the thing, too. Like, if you look at some of this stuff and you look at, like, some of the police reports, and it's like, all right, he doesn't fit the description. There's no evidence, pointing to this guy. This guy was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yep, they make the evidence point out.
Yeah. Picture this. In 1984, a 19-year-old Daryl Hunt was arrested and convicted for the rape and murder of Deborah Sykes on the outskirts of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And
his girlfriend even provided an alibi.
Yeah, so that's just crazy. And this guy was just, what? He was black. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. False information between trial. The prosecution used it anyway. All this other shit. So you can go down the list. It's just not West Memphis 3 in itself. There's so many other different cases that you could actually look at and put in place.
Who do you think?
I have a couple different theories.
Let's hear these theories.
So, like you mentioned before about the truck stop, right?
Yeah.
The truck stop is prime. Now, there was detectives that did come and say that this is not something that if you were a trucker, you would, come back here and find and then just kill, like, the kids.
No.
It's plausible. Maybe if you were a trucker that always visited the same rest stop and then
you saw them
and you had that thing. So one of my theories was, all right, it could have been like a trucker that knows the area, that has been to this truck stop many times and just, was like, all right, I'm ready to kill. Like, all right, here's some 3 easy targets. That was one of my things. Second thing was, everybody looks at Bojangles like, all right, he was covered in blood and everything. One of my theories is one of the parents probably coerced kids. It could have been Damien. It could have been Jason. I don't know if the Jesse, Miss Kelly, was really, he was probably there, but like didn't do anything. It could have been those set of teenagers or somebody else. And the parent coerced these kids into doing something. And then the gentleman, Mr. Bojangles, as he called, was in the wrong fucking place at the wrong time because he was probably like homeless.
Maybe.
Or he was probably just down on his luck and he was just in that area in the bayou and saw something that he shouldn't have. And he probably got attacked himself and was covered in blood and then finally made it, to the restaurant.
So you don't think he had anything to do with it?
I don't think Mr. Bojangles had anything to do with it.
Why?
There's just nothing there to support that. Like,
just
besides
blood and mud?
Yeah, there's blood and mud. Like, I feel like just in my gut, like, just tells me from some of the information, it was like he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, his hair was there.
Yeah.
But we don't know if it was his or somebody else's.
Sure you don't.
So my thing was either it was a neighbor or it was one of the parents.
Okay.
And they were just had a fit of rage. And
why would you kill all three of them then?
Well, at first I thought it was John Byers, right? Because like the only, like the kid that his dick was mutilated was his. And like the very aggressive stab wounds, like if you look at the pictures just like the way that they were tied up, they were killed. I definitely believe they were killed somewhere else and dumped there.
Yeah.
It could have been like in the field right next to it. It could have been in a house or it could have been like somewhere else. But I believe that they were killed somewhere else, probably in the vicinity, and then dumped there. Or they could have been brought like by a car. Who knows? But I believe one of the parents did it in like a fit of rage or something along those lines. And I don't know. Like, I don't have any evidence. It's just like kind of feelings and just like piecing together the information. And just from what I've learned over the years, just because of how much, and I think that's like the biggest thing for me is because the police fuck up a majority of the time in a lot of different cases. And I'm sure it's very difficult.
It is very difficult.
But at the same time, like if I had to pinpoint, I would say, I don't know. I have a feeling like maybe one of the boys was involved and with some other people and like a family member was involved. I really do believe like a family member was involved.
Yeah.
And because even going back to John Byers, right? Like we could look at John Byers. He has a history of medication, himself and fits of rage. He has run-ins with the law and his wife died, and when his wife died, it was undetermined.
Sure.
So they don't know if it was a homicide or a suicide.
Yeah, they don't.
And I don't know. It could have been him.
It could have
killed his wife too. Just kept feeding her pills and just said, "Fuck you, I'm gonna kill you too." And like I already killed the kids, and then because he paints himself into that light, and there was a lot of misinformation that he was giving, so I don't think he was very truthful. Then you look at somebody like Terry Hobbs, also a parent.
Mm-hmm.
They did find some sort of DNA attached to not his kid, another kid. Yep. So I don't know. It was because, hey, they that night supposedly too they were all over each other's houses. So
it could have just been on. Like
it could have been on him, right? But
because you were in the house,
right? So I don't know. This, to me, looking at just the evidence, it seems more of a, like, not a satanic ritual like they claimed it was originally, and they claim that these boys, were a part of. But it seems like it was more of
anger killing.
Yeah, like really just anger, really like hateful. And supposedly, like the little kids weren't like, you always hear on the news.
Yeah, they weren't.
Like, oh, they were just they were the best kids ever. They never did anything wrong. There was a couple of them, even, Byers' kid, who was on medication himself. So it seems like the whole fucking town was on ADHD some medication.
Or something like that.
Yeah, so he had some issues himself with behavior problems. So it could have been. I don't know. I would like to hear your thoughts, though. What do you think?
I really don't know. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, I don't really know.
Ooh, I thought you would have a good theory.
I really don't.
What do you think of? What do you think of the theories that I put forth?
That one of the parents did it. I mean, that's possible. But I think, I don't know, if you did a little bit more police work, you could. Back then, you would probably rule it out, maybe.
In terms of what, like the kids,
like,
or just like the parents,
like the alibi of like some of the parents, like maybe, like if you had DNA back then, it would be easier because like then you could see because you can't really wash blood out of your hands that quickly.
Right.
So if they could have did that pretty quick.
Well, that's another thing. There was blood at the scene, but there wasn't enough blood, I feel like, that warrants like they were killed there.
And like the DNA evidence that they did come up with didn't match any of the 3 original suspects and none of the kids.
Right.
You know, so you can't really tie them together. The bite marks in and of itself didn't match the 3 suspects as well. So I don't know, man. He's probably out there.
The government lies to you.
I mean, technically,
the government does lie to you.
It's the police, but yeah, I don't know, man. I really don't know.
Oh shit! I thought like looking into this, I thought you would be like, all right, I think the dad,
Mr. Bojangles, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not out of the realm.
That's the only plausible thing, or like somebody at the truck stop.
See, like the Mr. Bojangles, like,
because you don't know if maybe they were messing around with one of the trucks.
True. Do you think they got that far and was messing around? Like, I remember we used to do that, remember?
Yeah, we used to mess around with cars.
Yeah, I remember we used to go behind the old ShopRite.
Yeah.
And we would sit in, like, the ditch, and, like, the truckers that were there, like, unloading at ShopRite, we would throw snowballs at them in the winter.
Yeah.
And they would get really pissed and, like, come chase us, which I don't know why. I'd be like, all right, they're throwing snowballs. Who gives a shit? They didn't hit me. They're just hitting the truck.
Yeah, so I could see one of those 2 scenarios.
Yeah, and it this scenario too, at like the truck stop, always reminds me of like Joyride.
Yeah,
where they're messing around the CB, and I feel like that's a very underrated movie.
That is a good movie. Paul Walker.
But, yeah, rest in peace. But just thinking about that, like, how many? It brings to mind like how many people like that drive trucks are just like insane and are like secretly killers that get away with it because they just travel and they just know how to like do certain things, and they come in and like, all right, here's some good victims. I've been here for a while. I know this town. You know, they're not going to get it right, and then boom, you come in and do something. And then maybe the trucker was the one who actually killed these kids.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was just one of these sadistic motherfuckers that came out and was like, all right, I'm going to rape these kids and do all this shit. And then, this guy was here and he just stabbed them, beat him up, and then he makes his way to Bojangles, and then they think it's him, and this trucker's just out driving still.
Maybe. You'll never know. Yeah,
Mr. Bojangles too is like a good thing because like my gut says he didn't do it, but at the same time, because like I'm like, what in right mind if you were covered in blood and mud
would you go
into a restaurant and shit? Wouldn't. And they did say he was confused. So did he get into another fight somewhere else and then come in? Or, was he there at the wrong place at the wrong time?
Maybe he was mentally ill and he killed the kids.
There was another theory, right?
Because maybe they were messing around with him and then, he was distraught over it. So you don't know.
It's true. So that is a good suspect too. And then did you ever think about like one of the moms?
No.
You don't think?
No.
Because they just look too... Like, even watching old interviews and stuff, they just, I don't know, they didn't look like they would to me, just for the emotions.
You never know.
The 2 stepfathers, I could believe, but it's just weird. Isn't it weird to, like, think about, like, this happens, this still happens today, and, shit like this, wrongly convicted people. I don't know. There's just too much information. I don't think we can cover this. I hope we did, like, it justice in some ways, but there's just too much information. There's too much non-information as well.
Yeah, too much disinformation.
And just watching other people's take on it, it's like, all right, they're just opinions.
Yeah, they are.
And it's like, there's no other new facts that came out that we could say like, all right, this is definitive. Do you think this case will ever be solved?
No.
No, you just think this is...
Well, no, even if you have DNA from the suspect, you still need that suspect to match the DNA.
Yeah.
So you can't really do that. Unless like there was like some cameras or anything around where the boys were killed that you can go back to, but there wasn't. So
true, there wasn't.
No,
I don't know. Maybe Anthony has some more thoughts for us because he did brought this case to our attention. So anyway, thanks for tuning in and listening to CaseFile 58 about the West Memphis 3 and some of those other wrongly convicted people. So keep up with our weirdness by visiting Nightmare365.com to find all of our contact information. If you do have suggestions for shows or just some stories of some cool alien sightings, things like that, let us know because all of our information there, and help support the show and visit our shop. Also, which I didn't mention in the beginning, starting October 1st, we're actually launching nightmaretees.com. So that'll be tees not dedicated to horror, but dedicated to Halloween and the paranormal, conspiracies, things like that. So make sure to keep up with that with us, because I'll be posting that to our social media pages as well. And make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit the bell for notification. And you know what to do. as always. And until next time,
stay spooky.